He told his brother the truth about his wife, and she had the nerve to say this when she got caught. There is a moment when you find out something about someone you love, and your entire understanding of that person just quietly collapses. And that is exactly what happened here. A man found out that the woman he built a life with, the woman he shares a child with, the woman whose name is on the same mortgage as his, tried to call up one of his good friends for a late-night hookup. Not a flirty text. Not an emotional conversation that crossed a line. A booty call. Straight up, no ambiguity, documented in writing. And the worst part? She knew she got caught. She had proof sitting right in front of her face. And her explanation, her grand defense for why she did something that could destroy her entire marriage and her family, was that she did it because she is, and I quote, dumb. So the older brother in this story had to make a choice. He found out. He knew. And now he had to decide whether to tell his brother the truth or carry that weight in silence. And honestly, I think the way this whole thing unfolded tells us everything we need to know about who these people really are. Let us go back to where this started. The original situation was that this guy, our narrator, somehow came across messages or information showing that his brother's wife had reached out to one of the brother's close friends, trying to set up what was clearly a sexual encounter. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not someone venting to a friend. This was a married woman, with a child, a home, a whole constructed life, actively trying to step out on her husband with someone from his own social circle. And the narrator had to sit with that knowledge for some amount of time before doing anything about it. Think about what that actually feels like. You are holding a piece of information that you did not ask for, that you cannot unknow, and that has the power to completely rearrange someone you love's entire life. You cannot hand it back. You cannot pretend you never saw it. And every hour you hold on to it, you are making a choice whether you realize it or not. That detail matters more than people might initially realize. It was not a stranger. It was not someone she met online with no connection to her husband. She went after someone her husband trusted, someone who was part of their shared world, someone who had probably sat at their dinner table or been to their home or been introduced as one of the good ones. That is a specific kind of betrayal. That is not just cheating, that is a calculated move that would have placed a wedge inside her husband's closest relationships if it had gone further. The friend would have had to carry that secret, or come forward, or distance himself, and any of those outcomes quietly poisons something. The friendship gets complicated. The social circle shifts. The husband starts noticing that someone he trusted is acting differently around him and does not know why. The damage radiates outward even if nothing physical ever happens. The friend, to his credit, did not go along with it. That matters. He could have. He could have told himself it was not his problem, or that what happens between two adults in a marriage is none of his business, or that a one-time thing would disappear without consequences. But he did not. He was put in an impossible position by someone who had no right to put him there, and he handled himself with integrity. And the plan was to give that friend a chance to tell the brother himself before the narrator stepped in. That is actually a thoughtful and decent approach. Give the person closest to the situation the first opportunity to handle it with care. It respects the friend's position and acknowledges that he is the one who was directly approached, which means he may have the clearest and most complete picture of what actually happened. But then the friend had a sudden and serious health issue come up, which meant he was dealing with something far more pressing than a difficult conversation, and the window just stayed open without being addressed. So the timeline stretched. The silence continued. And the narrator was left sitting on something that had no good expiration date. So the narrator had to step in. And he did. He told his brother. Now here is where I want to slow down for a second, because I think this part gets glossed over. Telling someone that their partner betrayed them is one of the hardest things a person can do. It is not as simple as sending a message and walking away. You are handing someone a grenade and watching them hold it. You do not know how they are going to react. You do not know if they are going to believe you, or blame you, or fall apart in front of you. There is also the fear, whether spoken or not, that the messenger becomes the villain. That the brother turns his pain outward and directs it at the person who delivered the news instead of the person who caused it. That is not rational, but grief and betrayal rarely are. The narrator had to walk into that conversation knowing it might cost him something too, knowing his relationship with his brother could get complicated by this, and he did it anyway. Because he decided the truth mattered more than his own comfort. You are choosing to break someone's heart because you believe they deserve the truth more than they deserve comfortable ignorance. And that is a genuinely heavy thing to carry into a room. And the brother's reaction was exactly what you would expect from someone hearing something that shatters their world. He was angry. He was confused. He was sad. All of it at once, probably cycling through in waves because that is how that kind of shock actually works. Your brain cannot fully process it in one pass. It keeps looping back, looking for the angle where it does not mean what it clearly means, searching for the exit that does not exist. But here is the thing that jumped out at me. He said he already remembered that specific night and already had suspicions that something was off. His wife had come home that evening and could not give him a straight answer about where she had been. She had been vague, maybe overly casual, maybe just slightly off in a way that registered somewhere deep but did not rise to the level of accusation. That means he had already been quietly carrying that unease somewhere in the back of his mind. He did not have a name for it yet, but the discomfort was already there. That is such a painful thing to sit with. Knowing that something is wrong, feeling it in your gut, but not having anything solid enough to confront. Because if you bring it up without proof, you risk looking paranoid or controlling. You risk being told you are imagining things, and then you start to wonder if maybe you are. You talk yourself out of your own instincts because the alternative, that the person you love is lying to you, feels too large to hold. And then someone hands you exactly what you were afraid was true, confirmed in writing, and suddenly that quiet unease transforms into something much heavier and much more real. He thanked his brother for telling him. He did not lash out. He did not go into denial. He asked for a few days to process and figure out what he actually wanted to say before sitting down with his wife. That kind of restraint under that kind of pressure says a lot about who he is as a person. A lot of people would have gone home and blown the entire thing up that same night, would have walked through the door already on fire, already past the point of any productive conversation. He chose to give himself time to be deliberate. He was probably sitting somewhere alone during those few days, running the conversation in his head, thinking about his child, thinking about his house, thinking about every morning he woke up next to someone who was apparently capable of this, and he held all of that without detonating. That tells me he was trying to handle it with some dignity even while he was clearly devastated. When he finally did confront her, she denied it. Of course she denied it. That is the default move when you are caught doing something indefensible. Deny first, hope the evidence is not airtight, maybe create enough doubt to muddy the water. There is something almost mechanical about the way people reach for denial in those moments, like it is a reflex rather than a strategy, because some part of the brain decides that if you just say it did not happen with enough conviction, maybe reality will cooperate. The husband had been carrying this for days. He sat down across from the person he married, the person he shares a child with, and she looked at him and denied it. That is its own specific kind of cruelty, making someone question what they know to be true when they are already in pain. But the narrator had shared the actual messages with his brother before that conversation happened. So when she tried to deny it, her husband was already holding the receipts. She had no room to maneuver. The denial lasted exactly as long as it took for him to show her the evidence, and then the whole structure of it collapsed and she came clean. What she said next is honestly one of the most jaw-dropping things I have read in a long time. When pressed on why she did it, why she reached out to her husband's friend for a late-night hookup, her explanation was that she did it because she is dumb. That is it. That is the answer she chose. Not that she was going through something difficult. Not that she felt disconnected or unloved or that there were problems in the marriage that had gone unaddressed for too long. Not even a breakdown or a moment of weakness that she could attempt to frame with any kind of emotional complexity. She did not say she was lonely. She did not say she was scared. She did not say she had been struggling with something she did not know how to talk about. Just, I did it because I am dumb. Let me be very clear about something. That is not an explanation. That is not even an attempt at an explanation. That is a placeholder someone uses when they either cannot or will not do the actual work of being honest. It is the verbal equivalent of a shrug in the middle of the most serious conversation your marriage has ever had. And the fact that she showed no remorse alongside that non-answer makes the whole thing so much worse. Because at least guilt suggests some awareness that what you did was wrong. Guilt suggests that something in you recognizes the damage, that you understand there is a person across from you whose world you just rearranged, and that you feel the weight of that. Shame, even uncomfortable deflecting shame, would have been something. She did not even offer that. No remorse. No explanation. No visible understanding of what she had just done to her family. The brother left the house for a few hours after that, which again, honestly shows remarkable self-control given what he had just been through. He was trying to process, trying not to explode, trying to figure out what comes next. He was probably driving around with nowhere to go, or sitting in a parking lot, or calling someone he trusted, just trying to find somewhere to put all of it before he had to go back and look at his life again. And the narrator is honest about the fact that he does not know what his brother will ultimately decide to do. There is a child in this picture, a real little person whose daily life would be split in half by the decision to leave. There is a shared home, which means neither of them can just walk away cleanly. There is the practical and financial weight of a divorce, including attorney costs, splitting assets, custody arrangements, figuring out who stays and who goes and what the holidays look like from now on, all of it. Those are real barriers. They do not make staying right, but they are real enough to make leaving feel terrifying, especially when you are still in the first hours of the wound being fresh. Here is where I land on all of this, and I am not going to soften it. The brother's wife did not make a mistake. A mistake is something that happens in a moment of poor judgment that you immediately regret and that you are honest about when confronted. What she did was deliberate. She took out her phone and reached out to someone from her husband's inner circle with the specific intention of hooking up with him. And when that came to light, she first lied, then gave an explanation so hollow it might as well have been silence, and did all of it without a single visible sign of remorse. That is not someone who slipped up and is desperate to make things right. That is someone who, at best, does not fully grasp the weight of what they did, and at worst, simply does not care enough to be honest about it. Neither of those is a foundation you can build a real marriage on. Neither of those is something you can therapy your way through if only one person is willing to do the work. The narrator made the right call. There was no version of staying quiet that served his brother. Protecting someone from a painful truth is not really protection, it is just delayed devastation with the added insult of finding out you had people around you who knew and said nothing. His brother deserved to know. His brother thanked him for telling him. And now his brother is left holding the wreckage of something he built with someone who clearly was not as invested in protecting it as he was. Whatever he decides to do next, I hope he chooses himself. I hope he chooses the version of his future that has honesty in it, because he has already had enough of the alternative. And whoever is reading this, if you know him, let him know he is not crazy for what he is feeling, and he is not wrong for needing time to figure out what comes next. My sister threw away my weed and refused to pay me back, so I am taking this to the internet. 10:30 p.m. She held up the bag like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom, said "What is this?" dumped the entire thing onto the grass, and then had the absolute audacity to refuse to pay a single cent. And now we are here. Because yes, this actually happened. A grown woman walked onto someone else's property, destroyed someone else's legal purchase, and then decided the correct follow-up move was to stand firm on owing nothing. Okay, so let us actually walk through what went down here, because the details matter. Our narrator is 21 years old and she is at her mom's house watching the family pets while mom is away. It is a normal, quiet kind of responsibility, the kind of thing you do for family without thinking too much about it. She steps outside to smoke a bowl, which, fine, it is legal in her state, it is her choice, it is her business. She sets her bag of weed and her grinder down on the porch, goes back inside at some point, and just forgets to bring it in with her. Maybe she got distracted by the pets. Maybe her phone buzzed. Maybe she just did not think twice about it because she was in a private space where she had every right to be. That is the setup. Completely ordinary. Nothing about that moment felt like the beginning of anything. Now her sister, who is 32 years old, which I want to emphasize, 32, a fully grown adult woman, stops by. She spots the bag on the porch. And instead of setting it aside, instead of leaving it alone, instead of having a calm conversation with her adult sister about her feelings regarding it, she picks it up, holds it up in the air, and delivers what she clearly thought was a devastating dramatic moment. The what is this energy? The pregnant pause. The theatrical disappointment. You can almost picture the expression on her face. The raised eyebrow. The slow turn. The performance of moral authority that nobody in that situation actually assigned to her. And then she walked outside and dumped it all onto the grass. Not into a trash can. Not set aside with a note. Onto the grass. Like a statement. Like punctuation on a sentence she had already decided she was going to deliver the moment she saw it. Now look. I understand some people have very strong feelings about weed. That is fine. People are allowed to disagree about it. Some families have real tension around it, especially if there is a history of addiction or loss or personal trauma connected to substances. I get that. But here is the thing. This is not that. This is not a concerned sister sitting down, voice quiet, maybe even a little nervous, saying she is worried about something she has been watching for a while. This is not vulnerability. This is not care. This is someone walking into a space that is not hers and destroying property that does not belong to her, without being asked for any input at all. The weed was on the porch of a house she was visiting. She was not asked to house it. She was not responsible for the space. She walked in, saw something she personally disapproved of, and took unilateral action like the rules of basic property rights simply did not apply to her in that moment. And I want to point out something about the power dynamic here, because I think it is important to name it directly. The narrator says her sister is, and these are her words, very scary. She normally does not confront her. Think about what that means for a second. That means this dynamic has been going on for a while, probably years, possibly most of the narrator's life. There is a pattern here where the older sister's reactions and moods have historically been enough to stop the younger one from speaking up at all. That is not just a personality clash. That is learned behavior shaped by what has been reinforced over time, by every moment where the narrator swallowed something she wanted to say because the potential reaction was not worth it. And yet, in this moment, something shifted. The narrator stood up for herself. She looked at what had just happened, probably still feeling that familiar pull to go quiet, and she said anyway, "You owe me money for what you destroyed." That took actual courage. Real courage, not the dramatic movie kind, but the quiet, difficult kind that happens in kitchens and porches and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. And what did she get back? Nothing. Not a single cent. Not even an acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, destroying someone else's property without permission is not something a person gets to do for free regardless of their personal opinions. Can we also talk about the age gap here for just a second, because I think it says something? The sister is 32. She is 11 years older than the narrator. And she is standing in someone else's space, performing outrage at a bag of legal weed, throwing it on the grass like she is above the rules of basic property rights, and then refusing to make it right. 11 years of extra life experience, and this is where she landed. This is the move she thought was reasonable. This is the behavior she thought was appropriate for a grown woman visiting someone else's home. 32 years old and dunking someone's legal weed on the lawn like she is the sheriff of a mom's house she was just visiting. Here is the part that I think some people might actually disagree on, so let me address it directly. Some people will say the narrator left the weed out in a careless place and should have been more careful. And sure, in hindsight, leaving it on the porch where anyone stopping by could see it was not the most cautious move. That is fair to acknowledge. But carelessness is not the same as consent. Leaving something somewhere visible does not hand another person the authority to destroy it. If you left a bottle of wine on your porch and someone came over and poured it into the dirt because they personally disapprove of alcohol, nobody would be sitting back and saying, well, you really should have put it away. The issue is not location. The issue is that someone made a decision that was not theirs to make, using an authority she was never granted by anyone in that situation. Let me land where I stand on this, because this one is actually not complicated at all once you strip away the family drama and the sister's intimidation tactics. The narrator is 21 years old. She is a legal adult. She earned her own money and she spent it on something that is completely legal in her state. Her sister came onto someone else's property, found something she personally disagreed with, and destroyed it without asking, without warning, and without any intention of making it right afterward. There is no version of events where that is acceptable behavior between adults. It does not matter how strongly you feel about weed. It does not matter how dramatically you frame the confrontation. You do not get to destroy another adult's legal property and then walk away without consequence just because you disapprove of the thing you destroyed. The sister owes her the money. Full stop. And more than that, the narrator should not let the fact that her sister is, quote, very scary be the reason she backs down from something she is completely right about. Because here is what happens when you let someone steamroll you out of a legitimate boundary one time. They remember it. They file it away. And they bring that same energy to the next situation, and the one after that, because they have learned that it works on you specifically. Standing firm here is not just about the weed. It is about establishing that being an adult means your choices and your property get treated with basic respect, even by family members who disagree with those choices. Especially by them, actually. The narrator is not the asshole here. Not even close. And if the sister ever reads these comments, I hope she takes a long look at the gap between how she sees herself in this situation and how the rest of the world sees her, because those two things are very far apart. Drop a comment below and let me know which story hit harder for you. And if you made it this far, a like and a subscribe would mean the world.